Tier 1, El Chapo's Prison Escape, 2015. When we're talking about legendary prison escapes, literally nothing comes close to El Chapo's breakout in 2015. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the infamous boss of the Sinaloa cartel, was locked up in what was supposed to be Mexico's most secure prison, Altiplano. Maximum security, all the bells and whistles, but on the night of July 11th, 2015, he vanished like a ghost. I can't get over how audacious this escape was. The whole thing deserves its own movie. Here's how wild it was. El Chapo slipped through a hole in his shower floor. Yeah, you heard that right. A hole carved out with surgical precision, leading to a fully lit and ventilated tunnel, over a mile long, built right under the prison. The tunnel even had rails and a modified motorcycle rigged on a track so he could speed through it. It's the kind of thing you would expect in a Hollywood heist movie, not real life. Security footage later showed him pacing around his tiny cell before ducking behind the shower wall and never coming back. Guards did not even realize he was gone for almost 20 minutes. By the time they figured it out, El Chapo was long gone, surfacing in a construction site surrounded by farmland. The escape was an enormous embarrassment for the Mexican government. It exposed just how deep corruption ran. Investigations revealed that prison staff, police, and possibly higher officials had to be involved. I mean, how else do you build an entire escape tunnel without anyone noticing? His freedom did not last forever though. After a massive manhunt and international pressure, he was recaptured in early 2016. But honestly, that 2015 escape tunnel cemented El Chapo's legacy in the criminal underworld, not just as a drug lord, but as a legend of audacious escapes. Yakuza participation in disaster relief, 2011 tsunami. When the 2011 tsunami devastated Japan, most people would expect the government and international aid groups to jump into action, and they did. But there was another unexpected group that mobilized almost instantly, the Yakuza. Yeah, the same organized crime syndicates known for gambling, drugs, and extortion were suddenly handing out supplies and organizing relief efforts like seasoned humanitarians. Within just hours of the disaster, major Yakuza groups like the Yamaguchi-gumi and the Sumiyoshi Kai opened up their offices as shelters. They sent truckloads of food, water, blankets, diapers, you name it, straight into the worst hit areas. Some reports even said they delivered supplies faster than the Japanese government itself. It sounds bizarre, but it actually fits a long-standing Yakuza tradition. They see themselves as protectors of the community, not just criminals. In their twisted moral code, when ordinary people suffer, it is partly their duty to step up. There were even handwritten notes attached to some of the supplies saying things like, from the Yamaguchi-gumi, no effort to hide who was helping. Of course, not everyone saw it as pure charity. Some believed the Yakuza were doing it for good publicity or to expand their influence when the state was vulnerable. But for the people freezing and starving in those shelters, the source probably didn't matter much. They needed help, and someone showed up. I find it crazy that the Yakuza would get involved in disaster relief, but maybe the lesson here is that criminal organizations are a lot more complex than we think. The whole situation raised uncomfortable questions. When the official systems fail, what does it mean when organized crime fills the gap? It was rare, almost surreal moment when gangsters acted more like guardians. In a country as proud and orderly as Japan, seeing men covered in tattoos and missing fingers deliver relief supplies was a sight no one expected, but one that many victims never forgot. Italian mafia's garbage disposal monopoly. When people think about the Italian mafia, they usually picture drug deals, hits, and extortion. But one of their most profitable and least talked about operations is something a lot less glamorous: garbage. For decades, groups like the Camorra in Naples and the 'Ndrangheta in Calabria have had a stranglehold on Italy's waste management industry. And it's not just about picking up trash. It's about illegal dumping, toxic waste, and billions of dollars flowing quietly into the hands of organized crime. Here's how it works. The mafia wins contracts either through intimidation or bribery to handle garbage collection and disposal. Then, instead of properly dealing with it, they dump it wherever they can, in fields, abandoned quarries, and even residential areas. Hazardous waste from factories, chemicals, and even hospital waste, all just buried underground or burned in open air. It is cheaper, faster, and incredibly dangerous. One of the most notorious examples is the so-called Triangle of Death near Naples, an area where cancer rates have spiked terrifyingly high, allegedly because of toxic waste buried illegally by the Camorra. People living there breathe poisoned air, drink contaminated water, and grow food in toxic soil, often without even knowing it. What makes it even darker is that a lot of the waste they dump is not even Italian. Companies from across Europe have paid the mafia to get rid of their waste on the cheap. turning southern Italy into a dumping ground. It is a massive, slow-motion environmental disaster that has destroyed countless lives, and it's all been fueled by the quiet, dirty business of trash. It's not the flashy side of the mafia, but it's easily one of their most damaging and profitable rackets. And most of it stays hidden, buried underground. Literally. I'm amazed at how the mafia controls garbage disposal. It's such an unexpected part of their empire, and yet it's a perfect example of their reach. And now, it gets darker, obviously. The fall of the Cali cartel, 1990s. In the early 1990s, after Pablo Escobar's violent reign ended, it looked like Colombia might finally catch a break, but behind the scenes, the Cali cartel was quietly taking over. Unlike Escobar's flashy, shoot-everything-in-sight style, the Cali bosses were businessmen. Gilberto and Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela, along with Jose Santa Cruz Londoño and Elmir Pacho Herrera, ran their operation like a Fortune 500 company. Polite, quiet, and unbelievably rich. At their peak, they controlled up to 80% of the world's cocaine trade. What made them so hard to catch was how smart they were about corruption. They bought off police officers, judges, politicians, even parts of media. They bribed rather than killed whenever possible. Their money flowed like a river through Colombia's institutions. They even funneled millions into political campaigns of major candidates, including a future president. But by 1995, their empire started to crumble. US pressure on Colombia's government ramped up big time, forcing a crackdown. New President Ernesto Samper, who had his own scandalous ties to cartel money, could not ignore the situation anymore. With more aggressive tactics and new intelligence sharing agreements, Colombian authorities began kicking in doors. I think the downfall of the Cali cartel was inevitable once their operations got so big and exposed to law enforcement. It was just a matter of time. One by one, the Cali kingpins fell. Gilberto was arrested first, caught hiding inside a secret compartment in a house. Miguel tried to escape but was captured months later. Pacho surrendered, hoping for leniency, but was murdered inside prison. Santa Cruz escaped from jail, but was hunted down and killed shortly after. The fall of the Cali cartel marked the end of an era. They were the last of the major Colombian cartels to operate with near-complete impunity. After their downfall, the cocaine business splintered into smaller, more chaotic factions, and in some ways, the drug war only grew more complicated and bloody. Hope you're still watching, because this next bit is going to blow your mind. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you like what you see so far. The assassination of Dutch crime reporter Peter R. de Vries, 2021. Peter R. de Vries. This man was not just any journalist. He was a fearless crime reporter who spent decades exposing the darkest corners of organized crime in the Netherlands. He built his career chasing stories that most reporters would not dare touch, standing up to mob bosses, drug lords, and killers. But on July 6, 2021, everything came crashing down when he was shot in broad daylight on a busy Amsterdam street, just moments after leaving a television studio. It sent shockwaves across the country. De Vries was seen as untouchable, a national figure who helped solve cold cases, protected witnesses, and fought for justice even when it put a target on his back. He was known for his connection to a star witness, Nabil B, in a massive case against Redouane Taghi, the alleged leader of a brutal Moroccan-Dutch drug cartel. De Vries was not just reporting anymore. He was actively advising and supporting people who were trying to bring down powerful criminals. Investigators quickly tied the assassination to Taghi's network. It was not the first warning shot either. In the years leading up to Peter's death, Nabil B's brother had been killed, followed by his lawyer. De Vries seemed to know he was next, but refused to back down. This was just who he was. He survived the initial shooting long enough to be rushed to the hospital, but after 9 agonizing days, he passed away from his injuries. His death felt like a punch to the gut, not just for the Netherlands, but for anyone who believes in freedom of the press. It showed in the most brutal way possible that organized crime was no longer operating in the shadows. It was willing to strike openly, and no one, not even Peter R. de Vries, was safe. I don't know about you, but the assassination really freaked me out. Now for a topic you've all been waiting for, the mafia. And just a reminder that if you like videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. The rise of the Albanian mafia group in Europe. I'm honestly so fascinated by the Albanian mafia's rise in Europe. They've proven themselves to be ruthless and efficient, and I can't see them going anywhere anytime soon. Over the last couple of decades, the Albanian mafia has exploded into the European organized crime scene, and honestly, a lot of people did not even see it coming. Back in the 1990s, after the fall of communism in Albania and the brutal wars in the Balkans, chaos created the perfect breeding ground for crime syndicates. Many Albanians, toughened by years of hardship and conflict, spread across Europe, and some brought organized crime networks with them. At first, they flew under the radar. They were the muscle behind bigger groups like the Italian mafia or Serbian gangs, but it did not take long for them to build their own empires. By the 2010s, Albanian crime groups were running serious operations: drug trafficking, human smuggling, arms dealing, and extortion across places like Italy, Britain, Germany, and the Netherlands. Their real specialty? Cocaine. The Albanians carved out a massive piece of the European cocaine trade by forging direct ties with South American cartels. Instead of relying on middlemen, they cut deals straight at the source, making them richer and more powerful almost overnight. Authorities have said some Albanian groups are now on the same level as the Italian 'Ndrangheta, which is insane considering how new they are to the scene. What makes them even scarier is their reputation for extreme violence and loyalty. They're tightly knit, often based around family and blood ties, and they are absolutely ruthless with anyone who crosses them. In some countries, police admit they are almost impossible to infiltrate. Today, the Albanian mafia is no longer an upcoming threat. It is already a major player, from flashy clubs in London to the ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam. Their fingerprints are all over Europe's underworld, and they are still growing. Just when you think it can't get crazier, it does. Let's move on to Tier 2. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Tier 2. The 'Ndrangheta's Global Cocaine Empire. The 'Ndrangheta's global empire blows my mind. If you are talking about global drug empires, you cannot leave out the 'Ndrangheta. This shadowy mafia from Calabria, Italy, went from being a small backwoods operation to the undisputed kings of the world's cocaine trade. And they did it almost without anyone noticing. While groups like the Sicilian Cosa Nostra were making headlines in the 20th century, the 'Ndrangheta was quietly building deep, powerful networks that stretched across continents. Their big move came in the 1990s and early 2000s when they realized they could bypass traditional middlemen and go straight to the source, South America. They set up direct partnerships with Colombian, Peruvian, and Brazilian cartels, buying massive shipments of pure cocaine and smuggling it into Europe through ports like Gioia Tauro in Italy, Antwerp in Belgium, and Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Today, authorities estimate the 'Ndrangheta controls somewhere around 80% of Europe's cocaine market. Think about that, 80%. They rake in tens of billions of dollars every year, operating through a web of shell companies, corrupt officials, and coded family loyalty that makes them nearly bulletproof. Unlike flashier mafia groups, the 'Ndrangheta thrives on being invisible. Their members are bound by blood ties and silence, which makes infiltrating them almost impossible. They do not show off. They do not brag. They just get richer and more powerful while staying under the radar. But cracks are starting to show. Massive investigations like Operation Polino and Operation Rina Shita Scott have started to peel back the layers of their empire, leading to hundreds of arrests. Still, breaking the 'Ndrangheta will not be easy. They have embedded themselves deep into legitimate businesses, politics, and society itself, not just in Italy, but across Europe, North America, South America, and Australia. Their empire is global, and it is still growing. And just when you think it's over, something even more shocking comes to light: the Triad's role in human trafficking rings. When people hear about the Triads, they usually picture smoky gambling dens, money laundering, and maybe some gang fights in Hong Kong alleyways. But one of their most brutal and lucrative operations today is human trafficking, and it is way bigger and darker than most people realize. The Triads have built sprawling networks that smuggle thousands of people every year, often from China, Southeast Asia, and beyond, moving them across borders into places like the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe. It's not just about sneaking people across borders for a quick buck. These trafficking rings are deeply organized. Victims, many desperate for a better life, are promised jobs, visas, or education. But once they are in the system, the reality is terrifying. Some are forced into sweatshops, illegal brothels, domestic servitude, or drug trafficking. I think it's pretty damn disturbing. The extent of the Triad's involvement in human trafficking, it's honestly so heartbreaking how far some criminal organizations will go to exploit people. The Triads handle everything: fake documents, safe houses, transport routes, bribing officials, even arranging forced marriages to secure visas. And they have turned it into a global business worth billions. In places like the United Kingdom and Italy, authorities have uncovered entire underground economies fueled by this human trade, often hiding in plain sight in restaurants, massage parlors, and construction sites. The scariest part? The people caught up in these rings do not speak the local language, have no support network, and are too terrified to go to the police. For the Triads, That fear is part of the business model. The more isolated and invisible the victims are, the easier they are to control. Human trafficking might not be as flashy as drug deals or street wars, but for the triads, it is steady, ruthless money, and it leaves a trail of broken lives around the world. If you thought that was intense, get ready for the next level, and make sure you hit subscribe. The Sinaloa cartel's use of submarines. When you think of drug smuggling, you might picture hidden compartments in trucks or fast boats skimming over the water. But the Sinaloa cartel? It took it to a whole new level, literally underwater. Like, I can't even begin to explain how crazy these guys are. Starting in the early 2000s, the Sinaloa cartel began using homemade submarines known as narco subs to move massive amounts of cocaine and other drugs up the Pacific coastline towards the United States. At first, authorities could hardly believe it. These vessels were rough, often cobbled together in jungle workshops deep inside Colombia and Ecuador. Some were semi-submersible, meaning they floated just barely above the waterline, almost impossible to spot by radar or plane. Inside, tons of cocaine sat packed tight, along with the crew risking their lives to get the payload to its destination. Later versions became even more sophisticated. True submarines that could fully submerge with GPS navigation, reinforced hulls, and better stealth technology. The cartel's thinking was simple. While boats can be tracked and planes can be shot down, a sub lurking beneath the waves is almost invisible. It gave them a sneaky, highly effective way to avoid the Coast Guard, DEA, and Navy patrols. Even when the authorities caught one, the sheer volume of drugs had already made it through more than paid for the loss. Building a narco sub cost somewhere between a few $100,000 to a couple $1 million, but with each one carrying cargo worth tens of millions, it is a gamble the cartel is willing to take. Today, the Sinaloa cartel is not the only group using subs, but they were pioneers. Their underwater smuggling fleet has turned the drug war into something that feels more like a Cold War spy movie. Silent, secretive, and lurking just below the surface, always ready to slip away unseen. But wait until you hear this next ritual. It'll make your jaw drop to the floor. MS-13's ritual killings. Now this one will blow your mind. MS-13, short for Mara Salvatrucha, is infamous for a lot of things. Brutal war turfs, extortion, drug trafficking. But one of the darkest parts of their world is their ritual killings. These are not just random acts of violence. They are cold, calculated displays of power meant to terrify anyone who even thinks about crossing them. Murder, for MS-13, is not just a business. It is also a twisted form of initiation, loyalty testing, and psychological warfare. New recruits, often teenagers, are sometimes ordered to carry out murders as part of their initiation. It is not just enough to join. You have to prove your willingness to kill, often in the most gruesome way possible. Victims might be hacked apart with machetes, shot execution style, or tortured before being killed. The methods are meant to send a message. This is what happens to enemies, traitors, or even anyone who simply disrespects the gang. Many of these killings are symbolic, tied to MS-13's warped sense of honor and fear-based rule. Some murders are carried out at specific places, like remote wooded areas called killing fields, where victims are buried in shallow graves, sometimes never found. Others are left out in the open, bodies mutilated, as warnings to rivals or communities to stay silent. The brutality is often shocking, even to seasoned law enforcement. There have been cases where MS-13 members carved out hearts, dismembered bodies, or used satanic imagery during killings, and the gang's reach stretches far beyond El Salvador and Central America. Ritual killings have been reported in the United States, especially in places like Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C. suburbs. For MS-13, violence is not just a tool, it's a language. Every ritual killing shouts the same message: fear us, obey us, or end up just like them. The assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, 2021, and gang links. The assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse on July 7, 2021, shocked the world and plunged Haiti into deeper political turmoil. This brutal killing, carried out in his private residence, exposed the entrenched criminal networks operating within Haiti and their connections to political power. Stay seated because this one is quite something. Haiti was already facing significant challenges before Moïse's assassination. The country was struggling with political instability, widespread poverty, and the aftermath of natural disasters. Moise himself was a controversial figure who had been ruling by decree since January 2020 after dissolving parliament. Opposition groups accused him of corruption and autocratic tendencies, while gang violence was escalating throughout the country. The president had made powerful enemies both within Haiti's elite circles and criminal organizations by threatening to disrupt established power structures. Tensions mounted in the months preceding the assassination. Moise had announced plans to reform Haiti's constitution to strengthen presidential powers, which faced fierce opposition. He had also allegedly begun investigating links between prominent business figures and gang leaders who controlled large sections of Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. Reports suggested that Moise obtained evidence of gang involvement in drug trafficking operations with political protection, potentially threatening powerful criminal enterprises. His administration's attempts to assert control over gang-dominated territories further escalated animosity. In the early hours of July 7, 2021, approximately 28 mercenaries, including former Colombian military personnel and Haitian Americans, breached the presidential residence in Pearlin 5, a suburb of Port-au-Prince. They disabled security personnel without exchanging gunfire, suggesting possible inside cooperation. The attackers located Moise in his bedroom and shot him multiple times while his wife, Martine, was severely wounded but survived. According to autopsy reports, the president sustained 12 gunshot wounds and suffered broken bones. Shockingly, no security personnel were injured during the attack, raising questions about complicity. The assassination immediately created a power vacuum in Haiti. Prime Minister Claude Joseph initially assumed leadership, but a succession dispute emerged with Ariel Henry, whom Moise had appointed prime minister shortly before his death. International organizations called for investigation, while ordinary Haitians expressed both grief and concern about the future. The police quickly apprehended several suspects, though many questions were made about who orchestrated the attack and their motives. You're not ready for what's about to be revealed next. Trust me. Let's move on to the next tier. Tier 3. CJNG's narco tanks and makeshift armored vehicles. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, has transformed the Mexican drug war landscape through the development and deployment of narco tanks, or monstruos, monsters, improvised armor vehicles that served as mobile fortresses during territorial conflicts. These intimidating war machines represent a significant militarization of cartel capabilities, blurring the lines between organized crime and insurgency. Mexico's drug trafficking organizations have evolved dramatically since the early 2000s, when the government's aggressive campaign against cartels fragmented established power structures. The CJNG, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho, emerged as one of Mexico's most violent and technologically sophisticated criminal organizations. Operating in a landscape of intense competition with rival cartels, particularly the Sinaloa cartel, and confrontations with military forces, the CJNG sought tactical advantages through increasingly sophisticated weaponry and equipment. The unstable security environment, combined with Mexico's manufacturing capabilities and access to heavy machinery, created ideal conditions for narco tank development. The arms race between cartels intensified as territorial disputes became more violent. The CJNG faced growing resistance from both government forces and competing criminal organizations, particularly in the states of Jalisco, Michoacan, and Guanajuato. Standard pickup trucks and SUVs proved insufficient against military-grade weapons, creating a demand for better protected vehicles. Initially using basic armor modifications, the cartel gradually developed more sophisticated designs, establishing clandestine workshops in remote areas where skilled welders and mechanics could work undisturbed. Intelligence reports indicated the CJNG was recruiting former military personnel with specialized knowledge in vehicle armoring techniques. The cartel's narco tanks represent remarkable, albeit disturbing, feats of improvised engineering. Starting with commercial trucks or heavy equipment, CJNG workshops strip vehicles to their frames before reinforcing them with layered steel plating up to 1 inch thick. The finished vehicles feature gun ports, battering rams, elevated shooting platforms, and sometimes angled armor designed to deflect bullets. Some advanced models incorporate remote-controlled gun turrets, makeshift rockets, and even internal air conditioning systems for operators working in Mexico's heat. Painted matte black and often emblazoned with cartel insignia, these vehicles project power during armed confrontations while providing substantial protection against small arms fire and light explosives. Following several high-profile engagements where narco tanks appeared in convoys of up to a dozen vehicles, The Mexican government responded with increased military deployments to affected regions. Security forces adapted tactics, employing anti-armor weapons and aerial surveillance to counter the threat. Civilian populations in contested territories reported heightened anxiety as these ominous vehicles became symbols of cartel dominance. Social media platforms were flooded with images and videos of narco tanks, further amplifying the CJNG's psychological warfare strategy and recruitment efforts among disenfranchised youth who viewed the vehicles as symbols of power and rebellion. The proliferation of narco tanks has accelerated an already devastating security crisis in Mexico while inspiring similar adaptations by criminal groups worldwide. Military analysts now study cartel vehicle designs as examples of asymmetric warfare innovation, while Mexican authorities have invested in specialized training and equipment to counter these threats. The psychological impact extends beyond immediate security concerns as narco tanks represent the cartel's ability to challenge state authority through quasi-military capabilities. This arms race continues to escalate as cartels and security forces adapt to each other's tactics in a seemingly endless cycle of technological one-upmanship that ultimately extracts its heaviest toll on civilian populations caught in contested territories. Now, I know you're thinking this is already insane, but just wait, and make sure you hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Mafia money laundering through European football clubs. It's crazy to think that one of the most beloved sports is tainted by organized crime. At first glance, it just looks like rich guys throwing money at football clubs. Nothing new there, right? But dig a little deeper, and you will find that European football has quietly become a playground for organized crime, especially when it comes to laundering dirty money. The mafia, along with other crime syndicates, realized that buying into football clubs was the perfect cover. Massive amounts of cash flow, passionate fans, complex finances are just enough chaos to hide shady dealings. Here's how it usually works. A mafia-linked investor swoops in and buys a struggling club, often in the lower leagues where oversight is weaker. They pour in huge sums of investment, supposedly to buy players, upgrade stadiums, or pay off debts. In reality, a lot of that money is drug cash, extortion money, or profits from trafficking. By cycling it through player transfers, sponsorship deals, and shell companies tied to the club, the dirty money comes out sparkling clean. Player trades are especially useful for laundering. A club might buy a random player for an absurdly high fee, then quietly move the money between multiple accounts. Sponsorship deals with fake companies are another favorite trick, holding onto large sums of unexplained money under the guise of future investments or operating costs. Italy, Spain, and Eastern Europe have seen one of the worst cases, but it is a growing problem across the continent. Authorities have linked everything from Russian oligarchs to Calabrian Ndrangheta clans to suspicious club takeovers. And the craziest part? Fans usually have no idea. To them, it looks like their beloved club just got a lifeline. But behind the scenes, it is all part of a much bigger game, one where football is just another pawn in the global money laundering machine. Now, another one from the Balkans that will have you bulking. The Montenegro Connection, Balkan Smuggling Networks. I never realized how vast the Balkan smuggling networks were until I dug deeper into the Montenegro Connection. The Montenegro Connection might sound like the title of a spy thriller, but it is very real, and it is one of the most important smuggling networks in Europe that almost no one talks about. For years, organized crime groups based in Montenegro and across the Balkans have built a shadowy empire moving everything from cigarettes and weapons to narcotics and people across borders. It all started in the 1990s during the chaos of the Yugoslav wars. Sanctions, blockades, and the collapse of state institutions created a golden opportunity for smugglers. Montenegro, with its rugged coastline and strategic ports like Bar, became a critical hub. Cigarette smuggling was the first big business, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, and allegations flew that even top government officials were turning a blind eye, or worse, directly involved. But it didn't stop there. Over the years, the Montenegro Connection expanded into drugs, especially cocaine and heroin. Today, they act as brokers, helping South American cartels move product into Europe through the Adriatic Sea and partnering with the Albanian mafia, Italian Ndrangheta, and Serbian gangs to get it across the continent. They are masters at blending legitimate businesses with legal ones. Shipping companies, construction firms, tourism outfits, all can double as fronts for moving illicit goods. And because of deep political ties and rampant corruption, many of these operations run with shocking ease. Even now, after international investigations and major arrests, the Montenegro Connection is far from broken. It's just smarter and quieter. In a world of global crime, this Balkan network has become a major artery, a vital, if hidden, piece of how drugs, money, and contraband keep flowing across Europe, and most people have no idea it's happening right under their noses. Los Zetas founding by defected special forces. Los Zetas were not just another cartel, they were something far more terrifying. Born out of betrayal and blood, this group was founded in the late 1990s by defectors from Mexico's elite military forces. These men were not ordinary soldiers. They were highly trained killers, experts in counterinsurgency, marksmanship, ambush tactics, and psychological warfare. When they switched sides, they brought all those deadly skills straight into the criminal underworld. The fact that Los Zetas was founded by ex-Special Forces soldiers really tells you anyone can switch sides just like that. It all started when the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest drug organizations, realized they needed serious muscle to protect their empire. So they recruited around 30 former members of the Mexican Army's Special Forces group. And just like that, Los Zetas was born. At first, they worked as enforcers, assassins, and bodyguards. But it did not take long before they realized they did not need to work for anyone. They could run their own show. And they did. By the early 2000s, Los Zetas had split from the Gulf Cartel and launched their own brutal campaign to seize control of drug routes known as plazas. Unlike traditional cartels, they operated more like paramilitary force, heavily armed, disciplined, and absolutely ruthless. Beheadings, mass killings, and public displays of violence became their trademarks. They turned cities into war zones and terrorized anyone who stood in their way. Their military background gave them a terrifying advantage. They set up training camps, conducted coordinated attacks, and even used radio networks and encrypted communications. At their peak, they controlled huge swaths of territory not just through fear, but through sheer tactical superiority. Los Zetas changed the face of organized crime in Mexico. They showed the world what happens when elite soldiers go rogue and turned the drug war into something that looked less like gangsterism and more like full-on insurgency. And now for a little story that's gonna take everything up a notch. The disappearance of journalist Regina Martinez, 2012. Regina Martinez was not just any journalist. She was fearless. Working for the magazine Proceso, she spent years exposing the dark ties between government officials and drug cartels in Veracruz, Mexico, one of the most dangerous places in the world for reporters. She dug deep into stories others were too scared to touch: corruption, organized crime, political betrayals. But in April of 2012, her voice was silenced in the most brutal way. On April 28th, friends and colleagues became worried when Regina stopped answering her phone. When police finally entered her home, they found her body. She had been beaten and strangled. The scene was horrific, but sadly, not surprising. Veracruz had become a graveyard for journalists, and Regina had been one of the few still daring to tell the truth. Authorities quickly pinned the crime on a petty thief, claiming it was a robbery gone wrong, but almost nobody bought the story. There were no signs of forced entry. None of Regina's valuables were missing, and the timing? Right when she was investigating powerful figures linked to cartels, was just too suspicious. Many believed her murder was a calculated hit, meant to send a chilling message to any other journalist thinking about digging too deep. Her death sparked outrage internationally, but inside Mexico, it became just another case swallowed up by fear and impunity. No real investigation ever took place. No real answers ever came. Today, Regina Martinez is remembered as a symbol of courage and a grim reminder of how dangerous it is to tell the truth in a place where crime and politics are hopelessly tangled together. Her disappearance was not just the loss of one journalist, it was another blow to freedom of the press in a country desperate for it. Regina Martinez's disappearance still weighs on me. She was a fearless journalist, and her death speaks volumes about the dangers of uncovering crime in such a volatile environment. So, don't go playing investigator. Let me do it for you in this video, and in all the others on my channel. The corpse roads, routes used to transport bodies across borders. The idea of corpse roads sounds like something out of a horror movie, but in the dark world of organized crime, they are chillingly real. Across parts of Europe, Asia, and the Americas, criminal networks have carved out secret routes specifically for moving bodies, victims of gang wars, cartel killings, human trafficking gone wrong, and even organ harvesting operations. These routes are usually remote, snaking through forests, deserts, and mountain passes where border controls are weak or non-existent. They are not marked on any map, but criminals know them well. Bodies are often smuggled across to avoid drawing attention to murders in certain territories, to bury evidence, or to deliver corpses back to families for ransom or further intimidation. In Central America, for example, corpse roads have been used by cartels moving victims between Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. In Eastern Europe, some human trafficking rings use hidden forest trails between countries like Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine to dump bodies of migrants who did not survive the journey. Even in Western Europe, investigators have found evidence of criminal groups using isolated rural paths to transport victims killed during disputes over drugs or arms deals. It's not always about dumping bodies either. Corpses are carefully staged, left in specific areas as warnings to rivals. In others, trafficked individuals who died during the journey are quietly transported so that deaths do not raise suspicion at official checkpoints. The scariest part? Most of the time, authorities only find out about these corpse roads after a body is accidentally discovered. A hiker stumbles upon human remains, a farmer unearths something grim while plowing a field. By then, the trail is cold, and the people responsible are long gone, slipping back into the shadows where few dare to look. The idea of corpse roads is so chilling to me, I'm never going to forget about them. But there's obviously more. Ready for the bombshell? Let's get the Chinese involved, shall we? Chinese snakehead gangs and their global smuggling operations. When it comes to human smuggling on a global scale, few are as infamous or as elusive as the Chinese snakehead gangs. These tightly organized criminal networks specialize in moving people, mostly migrants from China, across continents in secret and often brutal journeys. I can't believe how spread out the Chinese snakehead gangs are, but honestly, with the way the Chinese are moving, who knows, they might become the next USA. They've set up global smuggling operations that exploit people all over the world, and it's honestly shocking. Their operations stretch from the rural villages of Fujian province all the way to the bustling cities of New York, London, and beyond. Snakeheads are not just random criminals. They operate more like underground travel agencies, offering desperate people a way out, for a price. Sometimes families in poor areas will scrape together tens of thousands of dollars to pay for a relative's journey. In return, the snakeheads promise to smuggle them into wealthy countries where they can work off the debt. But the reality is far harsher. The journeys are grueling and dangerous. Migrants are packed into shipping containers, hidden in secret compartments of trucks, or marched across remote borders under the cover of night. Some are passed between different smuggling cells across Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. If a migrant cannot pay, or if something goes wrong, they might be held hostage, forced into labor, or worse. One of the most infamous tragedies linked to snakehead gangs was the 2000 Dover incident, where 58 Chinese migrants suffocated to death in the back of a sealed truck while trying to reach England. It shocked the world, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. Snakehead gangs are notoriously hard to track. They use coded language, bribes, false documents, and a deep network of contracts to keep operations running smoothly. Despite crackdowns, they adapt quickly, finding new routes and new victims. At their core, snakehead gangs exploit hope, the hope for a better life. And they have turned that hope into a billion-dollar underground empire that thrives in the shadows of globalization. You think that's as bad as it can get? You might not have all the info yet. My channel could help fill in the gaps, so subscribe if you're interested. Tier 4. Project Cassandra. How DEA agents got blocked investigating Hezbollah's drug trade. Project Cassandra was a major DEA initiative aimed at dismantling Hezbollah's global drug trafficking and money laundering operations that generated billions for the militant group. This ambitious investigation uncovered how a designated terrorist organization had transformed parts of its structure into a sophisticated criminal enterprise with international reach. The investigation began in 2008 when DEA agents discovered Hezbollah's business affairs component, BAC, had established connections with South American cartels to move cocaine into Europe and the Middle East. The operation involved complex money laundering through used car businesses, consumer electronic exports, and the Hawala system. Intelligence revealed key figures like Ayman Juma, who allegedly coordinated multi-ton cocaine shipments from Colombia through Mexico to the United States. As Project Cassandra gathered evidence against approximately 30 key Hezbollah operatives between 2011 to 2014, agents reported encountering increasing internal resistance. Requests for arrests, prosecutions, and sanctions were delayed or denied. This period coincided with sensitive diplomatic negotiations surrounding the Iran nuclear deal, High-value targets like Ali Fayyad and Abdallah Safieddine remained beyond reach as Justice Department officials allegedly rejected requests to file criminal charges and limited investigative activities. The immediate aftermath left the investigative team frustrated as key targets escaped prosecution. Ali Fayyad, despite being indicted in the US, was ultimately freed by the Czech custody and returned to Lebanon. Several demoralized agents eventually left their positions, feeling their extensive work had been undermined by political considerations. In the long term, former team members claimed the failure to fully prosecute Hezbollah's network allowed the organization to expand its criminal operations substantially. The case highlighted tensions between law enforcement objectives and diplomatic priorities that continue to affect counter-terrorism and counter-narcotics operations today. Now, for something so bizarre, it's also a little funny. Cocaine hippos, environmental disaster funded by Pablo Escobar's fortune. I never thought I'd be learning about hippos causing an environmental disaster. It's a bizarre consequence of Escobar's criminal empire that I really think you need to hear about. It almost sounds too bizarre to be true, but the cocaine hippos are a real and growing environmental nightmare, and it all traces back to the infamous drug kingpin Pablo Escobar. During the height of his reign in the 1980s, Escobar built him a private zoo at his luxurious Hacienda Napoles estate in Colombia. Along with elephants, giraffes, and exotic birds, he imported 4 hippopotamuses from Africa simply because he could. After Escobar was killed in 1993, most of the animals were relocated. But the hippos? They were left behind. With no natural predators and Colombia's warm, wet climate, the hippos thrived, way beyond anyone's expectations. Those original 4 multiplied into a booming herd that today's numbers over 150, maybe even more. At first, locals thought they were a quirky attraction, but as the years went on, the problems became impossible to ignore. These so-called cocaine hippos began invading rivers, damaging ecosystems, and posing serious threats to human communities. Hippos are aggressive and territorial, far from the cute, lumbering creatures people imagine. Attacks on boats and people have already been reported, and experts warn it's only gonna get worse. Ecologically, the hippos are wreaking havoc. Their waste is throwing off the nutrient balance in the rivers and wetlands, threatening native species and reshaping entire ecosystems. Scientists now fear that if left unchecked, they could permanently alter Colombia's waterways. Attempts to control the population have hit roadblocks. Capturing or sterilizing the hippos is dangerous, expensive, and controversial. Some suggest mass culling, but public backlash, fueled by the hippos' weird pop culture fame, has made that politically tricky. In the end, Escobar's fortune may be long gone, but the chaos he unleashed, in the form of hundreds of rogue hippos, is still alive, stomping and snorting its way through Colombia's heartland. Since we're talking about Escobar, we have to talk about Jalisco, right? Jalisco cartel's use of weaponized drones. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, has revolutionized cartel warfare in Mexico through the deployment of weaponized drones carrying explosive devices, representing a dangerous technological evolution in drug trafficking organizations' arsenals. Mexico's criminal landscape has grown increasingly militarized as cartels compete for territorial control and trafficking routes. The CJNG, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, emerged as one of Mexico's most technologically advanced criminal organizations, constantly seeking tactical advantages against rivals and government forces. While traditional cartels relied primarily on firearms and ground operations, CJNG's leadership recognized the strategic potential of unmanned aerial systems that could deliver explosive payloads with minimal risk to operators. The cartel's drone capabilities evolved rapidly as tensions with rival organizations and security forces intensified. Initially employing commercial drones for surveillance, CJNG technicians began experimenting with modifications to carry small explosive devices. Intelligence reports indicated the cartel was recruiting individuals with technical expertise, possibly including former military personnel familiar with explosives. By 2020, evidence emerged of the cartel developing specialized workshops dedicated to drone modifications, focusing on extending flight ranges and increasing payload capacities. In early 2022, CJNG deployed its most sophisticated drone attacks, targeting rival cartel positions and police stations in Michoacan and Guanajuato. The modified commercial drones carrying C4 explosives with added shrapnel were programmed to drop their payloads with surprising precision. In one particularly deadly attack, surveillance footage captured a drone hovering briefly before releasing an explosive package that detonated among a group of rival cartel members, causing multiple casualties and demonstrating the weapon's lethal potential with minimal risk to the operators controlling the devices from kilometers away. Mexican authorities responded by establishing specialized counter-drone units and imposing restrictions on drone sales in conflict-affected regions. Military forces deployed jamming technologies in sensitive areas while accelerating training in drone countermeasures. Meanwhile, rival cartels scrambled to develop their own drone capabilities, triggering an aerial arms race. Local populations reported increased anxiety about potential overhead threats as the psychological impact of these attacks extended far beyond their physical damage. The weaponization of commercial drones by the CJNG has profoundly altered security dynamics in Mexico's drug war. Security analysts now regularly identify cartel drone innovations in their assignments of emerging threats, while military strategists worldwide study these adaptations as examples of criminal technology transfer. The proliferation of this capability has complicated Mexico's security challenges, forcing resource reallocation toward countering aerial threats while demonstrating how organized crime groups continue adapting commercial technologies for violent purposes. This technological escalation represents yet another threshold crossed in the increasingly sophisticated and lethal methods employed in Mexico's cartel conflicts. Now, it's the age of the internet. You have to think these guys could be making full use of it, right? So let's just acknowledge that all this crazy stuff has, in fact, also moved online. The shadow economy of dark web murder-for-hire rings. I'm honestly horrified at how easily you can access murder-for-hire services on the dark web. In the darkest corners of the internet, beyond the reach of Google or everyday browsers, there is a shadow economy that sounds like something ripped from a nightmare. Dark web murder-for-hire rings. These operations claim to offer professional assassins for anyone willing to pay the right price, often in untraceable cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. It usually works like this. A person stumbles onto a hidden site, places for an order, pays the fee, and provides details about their target. Some sites even let you pick how you want the job done, complete with pricing tiers for options like accident, kidnapping, or message sending. It is the ultimate anonymous crime, or at least, that is how it is sold. The truth is far messier. While a few real criminal outfits do operate in these dark spaces, a huge number of dark web murder-for-hire services are scams. They only exist to take desperate, angry, or naive people's money. There have been cases where the so-called hitmen turned out to be law enforcement agents setting traps, or scammers pocketing cash and disappearing. But not all of it is fake. Authorities have uncovered legitimate cases where people hired killers through encrypted dark websites. Investigations have traced murder attempts and successful attacks back to these digital black markets, showing that even a handful of real operations can cause staggering damage. The long-term repercussions? They are massive. The existence of these services erode trust in online privacy tools like encryption and cryptocurrencies, both of which have legitimate uses. They complicate law enforcement's job worldwide, creating a murky battlefield where criminals can operate across borders with almost no oversight. Even worse, they feed the growing myth that killing someone can be as easy as clicking a button, turning real human lives into commodities bought and sold in the cold anonymity of cyberspace. Up next, another cult. La Familia Michoacana's cult-like religion. I'm really freaked out by this one if I'm being real. La Familia Michoacana was never just another drug cartel. It was something far stranger, something that blurred the line between organized crime and religious cult. Founded in the early 2000s in the Mexican state of Michoacan, this cartel wrapped its brutal drug trade in the language of morality, redemption, and divine justice. At the center of it all was Nazario Moreno, also known as El Más Loco, the craziest one, who built an entire twisted ideology around himself. Moreno wrote a bizarre religious manifesto called Thoughts, which blended self-help advice, evangelical Christianity, and cartel loyalty into one strange doctrine. Members were required to read it, live by its teachings, and swear devotion not just to the organization, but to the spiritual cause it claimed to represent. La Familia presented itself as the defenders of the people, standing against the chaos caused by rival cartels. They even banned the production and sale of methamphetamine to locals, while shipping mountains of it across the border into the United States. But behind the sermons and community aid programs was a ruthless and violent machine. La Familia Michoacana used gruesome executions, public displays of dismembered bodies, and extreme intimidation to maintain their control. Disloyalty was met with a swift and brutal punishment, and recruits were often indoctrinated with heavy doses of religious fervor, making them believe their crimes were a part of a divine mission. The cult-like structure made La Familia extraordinarily difficult to dismantle, even after Nazario Moreno was reported dead. Twice, in fact, with the first death faked. Offshoots like the Knights Templar cartel rose from its ashes, Carrying the same warped blend of faith and violence, the legacy of La Familia Michoacana left a deep, dangerous mark on Michoacan, where cartel violence and pseudo-religious fanaticism still cast a long, deadly shadow. This next one is for my BuzzFeed Unsolved buffs. The unsolved mystery of the Vori v. Zakone codebooks. The Vori v. Zakone, Thieves-in-Law codebooks remain one of organized crime's most enigmatic artifacts, encrypted ledgers and communication systems used by the Soviet Union's elite criminal brotherhood. These mysterious codebooks contain the financial records, membership details, and operation protocols of one of history's most secretive criminal organizations. The Soviet prison system inadvertently created the perfect environment for sophisticated criminal networks to develop. Inside the gulags, elite criminals known as Vori established strict codes of conduct and sophisticated communication systems. The Brotherhood's rule forbade cooperation with authorities and required the maintenance of communal funds called obshak, necessitating secure record-keeping methods impenetrable to prison guards and investigators. Intelligence agencies became increasingly interested in the codebooks during the Cold War, viewing them as potential windows into Soviet underground networks. Reports emerged of complex alphanumeric systems using substitution ciphers, with specifically designated Vori serving as keepers of the code. The most tantalizing aspect of the rumored master codebook containing the organization's entire financial structure and membership registry. In 1991, a major breakthrough occurred during a raid on a Moscow apartment linked to a high-ranking Vor. Authorities discovered numerous notebooks containing what appeared to be encrypted financial records spanning several decades and territories. Cryptographers were brought in to decipher the symbols, numbers, and coded names, but the system proved remarkably resistant to conventional code-breaking techniques. The immediate investigation stalled due to the Soviet Union's collapse, with evidence reportedly disappearing from police custody. Crime researchers and intelligence services continue attempting to crack the Vori code systems, recognizing they could reveal the Brotherhood's global financial structures. The codebooks represent not just criminal accounting, but an entire parallel governance system, an underground constitution of the criminal world that remains largely undeciphered decades later. Are you guys ready to take this to the next level now? Because that was just baby stuff. Hit that subscribe button to let me know if you learned something new today. Tier 5, the Los Pepes Death Squads. Backed by Colombian rivals and possibly CIA, Los Pepes, perseguidos por Pablo Escobar, or People Persecuted by Pablo Escobar, emerged in 1992 as a shadowy vigilante group dedicated to eliminating Pablo Escobar and his Medellin cartel through extreme violence. This clandestine death squad operated with brutal efficiency in Colombia's drug-fueled conflict. Colombia at this time was experiencing unprecedented violence as Escobar waged war against the state. Following his escape from La Catedral prison, the government's search block struggled to recapture him while Escobar's bombings and assassinations terrorized Colombian society. Against this backdrop, Los Pepes formed, compromising former Medellin associates, members of the rival Cali cartel, and families of Escobar's victims. The group's campaign escalated rapidly. Using insider knowledge of Escobar's operations, Los Pepes systematically targeted his infrastructure, killing his lawyers, accountants, and associates. They destroyed properties and businesses linked to Escobar while leaving mutilated bodies with signs reading, "For working with Pablo Escobar." Los Pepes' operations showed remarkable coordination with official efforts. They attacked only Escobar's interests while leaving government forces untouched, suggesting information sharing with Colombian authorities. Declassified documents later indicated potential CIA knowledge of their activities, raising questions about American involvement. The immediate effect was devastating for Escobar, who found himself increasingly isolated as his support network disintegrated. Within months, Los Pepes had eliminated over 300 associates, crippling his organization. Following Escobar's death in December 1993, Los Pepes dissolved, but many members later joined the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, AUC, continuing their violent legacy in Colombia's ongoing conflict. Escobar's death might not have been the end of an era, but I think it only created a new set of problems. The violence didn't end at all, it just shifted. Which brings us to the mass graves of San Fernando, Mexico, 2010. The discovery of mass graves in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, containing 72 migrants brutally executed by Los Zetas cartel, exposed one of Mexico's most horrific cartel atrocities and highlighted the extreme vulnerability of migrants traversing cartel territory. I can't even talk about this one. Just kidding. I have to talk about this one because otherwise, how will you know about it? This gruesome finding revealed the evolution of cartel violence from targeted killings to mass murder of innocent civilians. Mexico's northern states were embroiled in territorial disputes between cartels. with Los Zetas formed by former Special Forces soldiers establishing a reputation for exceptional brutality. San Fernando, located on a key migration route toward the US border, became contested territory between the Zetas and Gulf Cartel following their split in 2010. Migrants passing through this corridor faced kidnapping for ransom or forced recruitment into cartel operations. Tensions escalated as Los Zetas implemented a strategy of extreme terror. The cartel began kidnapping buses full of travelers and migrants, forcing male captives to fight to death gladiator style or undergo training as cartel assassins. Those who refused were executed along women and others deemed unsuitable. In August 2010, a wounded Ecuadorian migrant staggered into a military checkpoint, leading authorities to a remote ranch where they discovered 72 bodies. 58 men and 14 women from Central and South America arranged in rows with hands bound and showing signs of torture and execution-style gunshots to the head. The immediate response included international outrage and diplomatic protests from countries whose citizens were among the victims. The Mexican government deployed additional military forces to Tamaulipas while facing criticism for failing to protect migrants. This massacre forced acknowledgement of the humanitarian crisis facing migrants and revealed how cartels had expanded beyond drug trafficking to become perpetrators of crimes against humanity. Yakuza's alleged nuclear material trafficking in the 90s. Japan's Yakuza crime syndicates allegedly entered the dangerous business of nuclear material trafficking during the 1990s, exploiting the chaos following the Soviet Union's collapse to access and trade weapons-grade materials on international black markets. Seriously, history is crazy, you guys. These activities represented a potential catastrophic convergence of organized crime and nuclear proliferation concerns. Following the Soviet Union's dissolution, security at nuclear facilities throughout the former Soviet republics deteriorated dramatically, creating opportunities for organized crime. The Yakuza, particularly the Yamaguchi-gumi and Inagawa-kai organizations, reportedly established connections with Russian criminal groups who had access to poorly guarded nuclear materials. Japanese intelligence indicated that Yakuza representatives were traveling frequently to Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine during this period. Tensions escalated when German police intercepted a shipment of weapons-grade uranium in 1994, allegedly destined for Asian buyers with suspected Yakuza connections. Intelligence agencies across multiple countries launched operations to monitor suspected trafficking networks. Reports emerged of Yakuza-affiliated nuclear brokers negotiating with potential buyers from unstable regions, presenting a significant international security threat. In a series of coordinated operations between 1995 and 1997, authorities conducted stings targeting suspected Yakuza nuclear material trafficking operations. Most notably, police in Vladivostok arrested several Japanese nationals and their Russian associates attempting to negotiate the sale of highly enriched uranium. Physical evidence was limited, but intelligence suggests smaller successful transactions had previously occurred. The immediate crackdown prompted increased security cooperation between Japan, Russia, and Western intelligence agencies. Nuclear facilities throughout former Soviet states received emergency security upgrades, while Yakuza leaders reportedly abandoned nuclear material pursuits due to intense scrutiny. The episode highlighted alarming vulnerabilities in nuclear security systems and demonstrated how organized crime groups could potentially facilitate nuclear proliferation, influencing subsequent international non-proliferation agreements and monitoring protocols. The disappearance of 43 students from Ayotzinapa, cartel and government collusion. The forced disappearance of 43 male students from Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College on September 26, 2014, in Iguala, Guerrero, stands as one of Mexico's most horrific human rights atrocities. I don't know how it can get worse than this, to be honest, and I've done a lot of videos on topics just like this on my channel. This case exposed the deadly collusion between local government officials, police forces, and drug cartels in parts of Mexico. The students had traveled to Iguala to commandeer buses for transportation to Mexico City for a protest commemorating the 1968 Tlatelolco massacre. As evening fell, local police and unidentified gunmen attacked the students in several locations throughout Iguala. By morning, 6 people had been killed, dozens wounded, and 43 students had vanished without a trace. Initial investigations revealed that Iguala's mayor, Jose Luis Abarca, and his wife had ties to the Guerreros Unidos cartel. Evidence suggested the mayor ordered police to intercept the students, fearing they would disrupt an event his wife was hosting. Police allegedly delivered the captured students to cartel members who took care of them. The government's first official explanation, that the students were killed and incinerated at a garbage dump in Cucula, was later discredited by independent forensic experts. Key suspects reported being tortured to extract confessions supporting this narrative, while critical evidence disappeared or was mishandled. The immediate aftermath sparked massive protests throughout Mexico and international condemnation. The case became emblematic of Mexico's larger crisis of disappearances, with over 100,000 people missing nationwide. Independent investigations revealed profound corruption within the investigation itself, with multiple officials later facing charges for obstructing justice and manipulating evidence. The tragedy exposed the entrenched nature of state criminal collusion in parts of Mexico, where the line between government authority and organized crime had effectively disappeared. The pink meth revenge porn networks operated by criminal syndicates. The pink meth revenge porn networks represented a disturbing convergence of cybercrime, extortion, and sexual exploitation, operated by sophisticated criminal syndicates on the dark web. Yeah, by the way, I said pink meth and revenge porn in the same sentence. These platforms specialized in non-consensual sharing of intimate images combined with victims' personal information, creating a devastating form of digital exploitation that ruined countless lives. Between 2011 and 2015, conventional internet platforms began actively removing revenge porn content, pushing these activities into darker corners of the web. Criminal organizations, primarily operating from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, recognized the lucrative potential in creating specialized platforms for this content. Unlike amateur revenge porn sites, these criminal networks developed sophisticated operations combining image hosting, doxing, revealing personal information, and monetization through extortion and blackmail schemes. The most notorious of these platforms, Pink Meth, emerged on Tor Hidden Services around 2012, gaining notoriety for its devastating approach to victims. The operation combined elements of traditional organized crime with technical sophistication. Former victims reported receiving messages demanding payment to remove their images and personal information. Those who refused often had their photos and identities sent directly to employers, family members, and social circles. Intelligence reports indicated the network maintained databases of victims, periodically recycling content to renew extortion attempts. Law enforcement agencies face significant challenges investigating these operations due to their use of cryptocurrency transactions, anonymous networks, and jurisdictional complexities. In 2014, a multinational task force launched Operation Digital Shame, targeting the financial infrastructure supporting these networks. The breakthrough came when investigators identified patterns in cryptocurrency transactions, linking the platforms to known criminal syndicates involved in other cybercrimes. In October 2015, coordinated raids across multiple countries resulted in the seizure of servers containing terabytes of exploitative material and the arrest of several key operators. Victims reported mixed emotions upon learning of the takedown, with many feeling relief while acknowledging the permanent digital nature of their exposure. Psychological support services reported overwhelming demand from those affected. The legacy of these networks continued to influence anti-exploitation legislation worldwide. The case highlighted how traditional organized crime had evolved to exploit digital vulnerabilities and human psychology. While Pink Meth was eventually dismantled, similar operations continued to emerge, adapting their methods to evade detection and capitalize on the devastating impact of digital sexual exploitation. If you're still unfazed, I have news for you. Gets worse. Welcome to the final tier. Tier 6. The Vatican Bank Scandal and Mafia Ties. Banco Ambrosiano Collapse. Surprise, surprise. The Vatican has some shady stuff going on through the back doors. The collapse of Banco Ambrosiano in 1982 exposed shocking connections between the Vatican Bank, organized crime, and powerful political lodges, becoming one of the most notorious financial scandals in modern history. This complex affair revealed a shadowy network of fraud, money laundering, and mysterious deaths reaching into the highest levels of Italian finance and the Catholic Church. Italy's financial landscape in the 1970s featured increasing mafia infiltration of legitimate banking, alongside growing political corruption. Banco Ambrosiano, led by Chairman Roberto Calvi, nicknamed God's Banker for his Vatican connections, had become Italy's largest privately owned bank. Through its chairman, the bank developed close ties with the Vatican's official financial institution, the Institute of Religious Works, IOR, then led by American Archbishop Paul Marcinkus. This relationship enabled the creation of a complex network of offshore shell companies in Panama and the Bahamas, ostensibly owned by the Vatican Bank but effectively controlled by Banco Ambrosiano. Tensions escalated as investigators began uncovering irregularities in Banco Ambrosiano's books. Italian authorities discovered the bank had made $1.4 billion in unsecured loans to these Vatican-linked shell companies, funds that had mysteriously vanished. Simultaneously, evidence emerged suggesting the bank was laundering money for mafia families and channeling funds to political causes, particularly anti-communist efforts in Latin America. The scandal intersected with investigations into the secretive P2 Masonic Lodge, whose membership included influential figures across Italian society. The case took a dramatic turn on June 18, 1982, when Roberto Calvi was found hanging beneath London's Blackfriars Bridge, his pockets weighted with bricks and carrying 14,000 in various currencies. Initially ruled as a suicide, later forensic examinations determined Calvi was murdered. Days after his death, Banco Ambrosiano collapsed with $1.3 billion in debt. The timing and theatrical nature of Calvi's death, suspended under Blackfriars Bridge, while mafia hitmen were sometimes called men of honor in black robes, sent a chilling message through Italian financial circles. In the aftermath, the Vatican eventually paid $250 million to Banco Ambrosiano's creditors without admitting wrongdoing, while Archbishop Marcinkus remained protected by diplomatic immunity within Vatican walls. Italian prosecutors named prominent mafia figures in connection with Calvi's murder, though convictions proved elusive. The scandal prompted major reforms in international banking oversight and Vatican financial operations, yet the full truth behind interconnected web of banking fraud, organized crime, and political manipulation remains partially obscured, demonstrating how effectively powerful institutions can shield themselves even after catastrophic public failures. Narco-Satanism, the cult of Adolfo Constanzo. Adolfo Constanzo emerged as one of Mexico's most terrifying criminal figures by fusing drug trafficking with a perverted form of religious practice, creating a cult that committed ritual murders believed to provide supernatural protection for cartel operations. I love talking about cults, so I'm particularly excited to tell you about this one. So this guy's narco-Satanism represented an unprecedented convergence of organized crime and occult practices that terrorized both rival criminals and law enforcement. During the 1980s, Mexican drug trafficking organizations were evolving into sophisticated criminal enterprises requiring increased security against both rivals and authorities. Constanzo, born in Miami to Cuban parents and trained in various occult traditions including Palo Mayombe, Santeria, and Mexican witchcraft, recognized an opportunity to market spiritual security services to cartel members. Beginning as a spiritual advisor offering protection spells and fortune-telling to Mexico's criminal elite, he gradually built a devoted following while developing connections with mid-level drug traffickers who believed his rituals provided genuine magical protection. Constanzo's operation took a sinister turn as he intensified his rituals, claiming that human sacrifice was necessary for the most powerful protection spells. The cult established a ranch in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, where Constanzo and his followers, including several drug traffickers and his second-in-command, Sara Aldrete, known as The Witch, performed increasingly elaborate ceremonies. The group abducted victims, including American college student Mark Kilroy in 1989, whose body parts were used in ritual cauldrons called Naganga. Cult members believed these ceremonies rendered them invisible to police and bulletproof against enemies. The disappearance of Kilroy triggered an intensive investigation that led police to the Rancho Santa Elena in April 1989, where they discovered evidence of at least 15 ritual murders. The compound contained cauldrons filled with blood, brains, animal parts, and human remains alongside ritual items. Investigators found a makeshift altar, occult symbols, and luxurious accommodations financed by drug trafficking operations. The gruesome discovery shocked even veteran officers, with many reportedly vomiting upon witnessing the scene. The immediate manhunt forced Constanzo and his inner circle to flee to Mexico City, where police cornered them on May 6, 1989. Rather than face capture, Constanzo ordered follower Martin Quintana to shoot him and his lover, ultimately dying by murder-suicide. Several cult members received lengthy prison sentences, including Aldrete, who was sentenced to 62 years. The case fundamentally altered understanding of the psychological dimensions of organized crime in Mexico, revealing how belief systems could intensify criminal violence while binding followers to leaders through spiritual terror. The legacy of narco-Satanism continues to influence both popular culture and security approaches to criminal organizations that employ religious or cult-like structures to maintain internal discipline and project terrifying reputations. Now it can't get any worse, unless you throw in children. And before we say goodbye, remember to hit the subscribe button and check out similar content on our channel. Alleged cartel-run orphanages for child soldiers. Reports of cartels operating orphanages as recruitment centers for child soldiers represent one of the most disturbing developments in Mexico's drug war. Mexico, why you gotta be like that, man? These facilities allegedly function as pipeline institutions where vulnerable children are systematically groomed, indoctrinated, and trained to become sicarios, hitmen, and foot soldiers for criminal organizations. Across regions with limited government presence, particularly in states like Tamaulipas, Michoacan, and Guerrero, cartels have reportedly established orphanages or infiltrated existing facilities. These operations target society's most vulnerable children, those without family connections or state protection. Local investigations have documented cases where cartel-affiliated individuals have established or taken control of childcare facilities in rural communities and urban peripheries experiencing high violence rates. The transformation process typically begins with providing basic necessities, creating dependency and loyalty. Children reportedly receive gradually escalating exposure to violence through staged events, videos of cartel activities, and participation in minor criminal acts. Physical training and weapons familiarization follow for selected children showing psychological adaptability to violence. According to human rights organizations investigating these allegations, these institutions serve multiple purposes within cartel structures. Beyond creating loyal soldiers with no family ties, they establish community presence masked as social service and develop personnel without existing criminal records who can operate without immediate suspicion. Mexican authorities have conducted several raids on suspected facilities, though concrete evidence remains limited due to witness intimidation and the remote location of many operations. Children rescued from these environments exhibit severe trauma, normalized violence, and cartel indoctrination, creating immense rehabilitation challenges. This phenomenon reflects the cartel's long-term strategic thinking and exploitation of state failures in child protection systems. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on, and I'll see you in the next video.